So we started part one last week, and there's a couple of surprises in here. A quick summary from last week. We know that anything that is precious, sanctified, set apart to our Father, the enemy, it's a target to him. And so we've looked at a couple of things before, and we're looking at his feasts and his Sabbaths and his times today. And he told us the times would be lost. We would go astray as to the new months and the order of the years and forget the months, the seasons, and the Shabbats and his feasts. We'd forget all these things. He told us we would. And he told us how we'd forget it in part. He told us by looking at the moon, it would disturb the seasons and make the year come in 10 days too soon. And we'd walk according to the feast of the Gentiles. And we all know what those are, I hope. And we'd make an abominable day, a day of testimony, and an unclean day, a feast day. And we would miss these things. Let's look at Daniel, and he says, "He shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws." So you change times and laws by changing a calendar. And an Egyptian astrologer quoted Antiochus, not the king Antiochus IV from Seleucid Empire, but a Greek astrologer, and he's quoted him as saying that the new moon is the time when the moon is born and is the birthday of the month, and that comes from one of his books. So he's syncing up what the new moon is. It's a birthday of the month. And so just remember that in Maccabees, Antiochus IV wrote to his whole kingdom and said, we should all be one people, give up your customs, every nation give up your customs, and let's standardize to one thing. Let's have one religion, one set of rules, one calendar. And even many from Israel gladly adopted this religion. They were Hellenized. They sacrificed to idols, profaned the Sabbaths, and they made themselves abominable in every way. And then the king sort of added a little emphasis to do this thing and said, whoever does not obey the command of the king shall die. Some of them succumbed to that. They did not endure. And that's all these things are shadow pictures to us as we're seeing a call to what's called Chrislam, a unified religion, and it's going to get stronger and stronger, and we have to endure those things and stay apart from those things no matter what they call for if we don't obey. Going back to the birthday of the month, the king sent a senator to compel the people of Judea around Jerusalem to forsake the laws of their fathers, forsake the Torah and the ordinances, and cease to live by the laws of Yah, and to pollute the temple in Jerusalem and call it the temple of Olympian Zeus, which ended up with the initial abomination of desolation when they put a pig on the altar and caused the altar to be desolate. And then on the monthly birthday celebration, I'm reading straight from Maccabees, the king had the Jews taken under bitter constraint. They did not want to do this, to partake of these sacrifices. And when the feast of Dionysus came, they were forced to walk in the procession in honor of Dionysus. So we look straight at Jubilees there, and it's just basically fulfilling the initial version of that prophecy, because Jubilee said that they will forget the feast and walk according to the feast of the Gentiles, the feast of Dionysus, after their error, for there will be those who assuredly make observations of the moon, because they were doing that on the birthday of the month celebrations. And this reason they will go wrong as the new months, and then they'll eat all kinds of blood with all kinds of fleshes, which they were being forced to, which is what the altar was desolated with the swine. So you can see Jubilees and Maccabees just dovetails right together on the prophecy and fulfillment. Don't think that those things have ended in antiquity. They go on now even more so. The Feast of Dionysus is Mardi Gras. When the Feast of Dionysus came, they were forced to walk in the procession in honor of Dionysus, wearing wreaths of ivory. We just read that. The pagan Greek god Dionysus, who had fertility, insanity, ritual madness, ecstasy, festivity, and theater, is the same as the pagan Roman god Bacchus. They were just, renamed the gods. They worshipped him, and whoever partaken of his mysteries and his feast, which was that procession, which was a parade, they were believed to become possessed and empowered by that God himself. And who doesn't see that evidence for the people that are doing those things at Mardi Gras, that they get possessed by things that are not righteous? But that's that direct link that we can see for every Gentile feast. Every Western celebration we have almost has these pagan origins, and all these pagan origins then are linked right back to the adversary. And we're supposed to stay away from those, because you can only sit at Yah's table or Satan's table. You can't sit at both. You see, he's bombarding the feast. We've looked at Halloween last year. We've looked at now Mardi Gras. We'll continue to look at these as they come along. What's the purpose of the sun? We go back to Genesis. Elohim said there'll be lights in the firmament for the heavens, and for signs and for seasons, for days and years, and the greater light will rule the day, the lesser light will rule the night, and he made the stars also. And then Jubilees dovetails right on top of that with just a little bit extra information. On the fourth day he created the sun and the moon and the stars to give light upon the earth, to rule the day and the night, divide the darkness from the light. And he appointed the sun as a great sign upon the earth for days and Sabbaths, for months, for feasts, for years, for Shabbats of years, for jubilees, and all the seasons of the years. So he's putting a great emphasis on the sun to carry these calendar items, to keep these things in sync on a daily basis. I'm introducing a book here today called Enoch. Some of you have heard of it, some may not have. And this is an extra book that's outside of quote-unquote traditional canon. But it was very important to antiquity. It was in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It was in their collection. It was known back then. There were 11 different scrolls of Enoch in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And as you saw last week, we saw 15 scrolls of Jubilees in there, which we were quoting in last week and still quote a little bit this week. And that was more scrolls of Jubilees than all the major prophets except one, and all the books except for Psalms, and then 3 of the Torah books. This scroll was important to them. They had multiple copies of it, as many as the other books that we call canon in the Old Testament. And so there are also portions of Enoch that are found in Greek literature of antiquity, different other scrolls. It's found in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in its entirety. And when they compare a scroll that's found in the Dead Sea of Enoch with the Ethiopian book that they have kept, it's basically the same. A few minor changes, but it's basically the same again. You can go look at all this stuff. It's out there on Dead Sea Scrolls website, and it's a pretty interesting site to go look at these things. Enoch was also referenced in the New Testament. Now, Enoch by faith was translated that he should not see death and was not found because Elohim translated him. Hebrews 11:5. And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied. It said, "Behold, the Adon comes with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment of all, and convince all that are ungodly among them of their ungodly deeds which they have committed, and all their hard speeches which the sinners have spoken against them." That's in Jude 1. And if you look in Enoch 1:9, Jude basically quotes Enoch 1:9 almost to the word, the very word. So you can see the half-brother of our Messiah is quoting Enoch. That's not all. If you look in Enoch and read through it, you'll see a lot of similarities with the New Testament. And in Enoch 5, it says, "They shall inherit the earth, the elect there, that shall be light and joy and peace." And it's just like what Messiah said, the meek shall inherit the earth. Where's the resting place for those that have denied the Most High? It had been good for them if they had not been born, which is exactly what Messiah said to Judas. His judgments have no respecters of persons. Paul quoted Enoch 63, or at least had the same idea inspired from the Spirit. Enoch 46 says, "This is the Son of Man who reveals all the treasures which is hidden, and in Messiah in whom all things are hid, the treasures of wisdom and knowledge." Again, Paul. And recognize Enoch, was the 7th generation. So this book was written a long time ago, and he's saying, this is the Son of Man. So Yah's plan was revealed to his elect, the righteous, a long time ago. And here's the most interesting one to me, Enoch 47. "I saw the head of days when he seated himself upon the throne of his glory, and the books of the living were opened before him." And Revelation 20, at the end of Revelation, says, "I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, and another book was opened, which is the book of life." And you can maybe tie some of these pieces together if you remember what we talked about, that some items in the Old Testament, some verses have been altered when the prophecies were shedding the direct path to our Messiah. And the Jewish leaders of the day didn't want that. They wanted to ignore who he was because they knew who he was. And so they changed some verses and pointed it back to them, or at least away from Messiah. So why didn't Enoch get into the canon back then? Well, Enoch is all about the Son of Man multiple times. And so what are they going to do with that? Well, we might need to get rid of that. And there's another reason, which you'll see in a second. Enoch talks a lot about the ordinances of the heavens. He says the moon brings on all the years exactly, that the years may be changed with correct precision in 364 days, Enoch 73. And so he's saying the moon isn't very important to the calendar. It has to be there to recognize when the calendar starts because it tells you when the year starts. And we'll look at this in a second. In Genesis 1, it says, they're there for signs and seasons and days and years, and he appointed the moon for seasons, and the sun knows is going down. So seasons is Moedim in the Old Testament in Hebrew, and it means many things. It's an appointed time, a set time. It's his feast, and we know that's his time, his feast, and so we're supposed to show up when he tells us to. And so a Moedim is his times, his appointed times, which can be feast, it can be other things. It can be signs in the heavens, just like what we saw in Revelation 12. It says, there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. So the stars and the moon are used there as part of this great sign in the sky, this wonder. And so you can see, this is Ot in Hebrew, so you can see how all of the signs in heaven, the lights of the heaven, are used, both to keep time, but then also appointed times and different means. Just understanding that seasons and signs can mean many different things. It doesn't have to just mean one thing. We'll go back to Jubilees here. The calendar is 364 days in Jubilee 6. It says, this will constitute a complete year. This is the calendar, and they will not disturb its time from its days and from its feasts. And the children will disturb them in the end because they will not make the year 364 days only. And for this reason, they will go wrong. And then we read the rest of Jubilee 6 before at the beginning in the summary. And Enoch 81 dovetails onto this. It says there's 4 conductors that separate the 4 quarters. There's 12 conductors, which are the months, separate the months and the years into 364 days. And the 4 additional ones, which are those 4 conductors, which divide the 4 quarters of the year. Now that's tough to understand, but let's keep going here because we'll pull it all together. The spring begins the year. We saw this in Deuteronomy and Exodus last week. Observe the month Abib and keep the Passover, Pesach, unto Yah. And it was done in the spring of the year when the barley harvest was just becoming almost fully ready for harvest. The first portions of the harvest were ready for the wave offering. And then in Enoch 81, it says in the first part of the year is when it's 91 days, and the signs of this part of the year is when the trees become fruitful and the leaves of every tree come forth, the rose and every species of flower blossom. So you can say we're talking about the springtime at the beginning of the year. So Enoch verifies a second witness to what is said in Exodus and Deuteronomy. The beginning of the year is in the spring. And then it has other passages that talk about the summer, fall, and winter in Enoch 81. Enoch 72. This is going to be held to all the years of the world and unto eternity until the new creation is accomplished. Until the heavens and earth pass away, this is what you're supposed to keep. And this is the first law of the luminaries. The luminary is the sun, which is the first luminary. It rises in the first month, and there are 30 mornings in succession. And then talks about how the night will become longer and the night becomes shorter in this season, which is the spring. Enoch 72 goes through each of the 12 months. And so I'm just going to summarize these instead of reading it. The month 1 is 30 days, the second month is 30 days, and the third month is 31 days. The fourth month is 30 days, the fifth month is 30 days, the sixth month is 31 days. We're starting to see a pattern, 30, 30, 31. Seventh month is 30 days, eighth month is 30 days, ninth month is 31. 30, 30, 31. 10th month is 30 days, 11th month is 30 days, and the 12th month is 31 days. Again, patterns of 30, 30, and 31 in each of the seasons, each of the quarters. And that 31st day is that day that divides the seasons that we just read about, one of the leaders. And Jubilees verifies this. It says they placed them on the heavenly tablets. This is not earthly commands, this is in the heavenly tablets. Each had 13 weeks. And that's each season had 13 weeks. And if you do that, 13 times 7 is 91 days, which is 30 plus 30 plus 31. So they match. And all the days of the commandment will be 52 weeks of days, which is 4 times 13 weeks. And the entire year will be complete. This is engraven and ordained on the heavenly tablets, and there's no neglecting this commandment for a single year or from year to year. We also see that he keeps his feasts in heavens. In Jubilee 6, he went to Noah after Noah provided a sacrifice to him after the ark had settled. And he showed Noah a sign that there would not be a flood again on the earth. And he set his rainbow in the clouds for this sign, for this covenant. For this reason it is ordained and written on the heavenly tablets that they should celebrate the Feast of Weeks, which we know as the Feast of Shavuot, the one-day celebration that happens in the third month of the Hebrew year. This whole festival was celebrated in heaven, not from the day of Noah, but from the day of creation. He's been celebrating the feast even before he told us about them. And then Abraham observed it after Noah and Isaac and Jacob, but then the children of Jacob forgot it after they went to Egypt, and then they were reminded at Mount Sinai to keep these feasts. For it is the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of First Fruits, Shavuot, the Feast of Sevens. And the main thing to remember here is he keeps these feasts in heaven. It's his calendar, his appointed time, his feast. And he told us when these are going to be by his calendar. And he wants us to be celebrating the feast on earth in lockstep with how they're celebrating it in heavens. And the calendar has not changed. Observe everything that takes place in the heaven, how they do not change their orbits, the luminaries which are in heaven, how they all rise and set in order, each in its season, and transgress not against their appointed order. They are steadfast, they don't change. All the works of Yah appear to you, consistent. Thus all his works go on from year to year forever. Their tasks change not. Until the new creation that we just saw, for according to Yah, it is ordained so. He's spoken it. When you understand these ordinances, they don't change. And so he set times for the months and the years. And he said the day starts when the sun rises, as we saw a couple of teachings ago. And so those things that are looked at as Joshua's long day, where the day was stretched for 2 days so he could continue battle, or Hezekiah, where the shadow went back 10 degrees, 10 steps, that was inside of a day. But that didn't change his ordinance because the day starts when the next sun rises. Note these things. So when we looked at the lunar calendar before, we had this test, this scriptural test that showed us that it was mathematically impossible for a lunar calendar to work. And the first one we looked at was the Genesis flood test. 5 months to the day, 150 days. In the second month, the 17th day of the month, the flood waters started. The deep broke up, the rain started, and the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. And then after the end of 150 days, on the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the waters abated and the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat. And so he's saying from 217 to 717, that's 150 days on the money. And so we can do the math real easy and say that's 30 days a month. Exactly, 30.0. And we saw the same thing in Revelation. It was exactly the same. So the calendar was 30 days a month at the beginning, and now at the end of time, it's 30 days a month. The Great Tribulation, a time times and a half a time, or 42 months and 1,260 days. All of that is 30 days a month when you do the math. And we did some math last week, so we're not doing it this week. One more thing in Revelation, another witness to the 30 days. So we have multiple witnesses in Revelation and Genesis, and it's 30 days, 30 days, 30 days for months. But we recognize that in our scripture, he says every month is going to be 30 days on the average. Now, we just saw something Enoch said 30, 30, 31. That would be 30.3333 recurring. Something is amiss here, right? This is a verse where some people in Enoch don't finish reading or don't understand. It says in Enoch 74 that intercalary days are not used to calculate times. These 4 leaders, the 31st day, the end of every season, these 4 days are not computed in the computation of the year, but respecting them in the computations, men err greatly. There's one in the first gate, one in the third, one in the fourth, one in the sixth, in the spring, summer, fall, and winter. And the harmony of the world becomes complete every 364 days. This is what he's saying. When you calculate a number of months, like 5 months in Genesis, it's supposed to be calculated as 30 days. Don't look at your intercalary days, the seasonal leaders. Don't look at those. Don't bother with that, because that would put you through some mental acrobatics fair. What month was that when that started? How many days are in intercalary days? He just says, calculate 30 days a month if you want to calculate 5 months in Genesis or 42 months in Revelation. Multiply by 30, and that's your answer. But the calendar is 364 days. His words. And he says it again in Enoch 81 in different words. Do not compute them in the computation of every age. They greatly err respecting them. These are marked down forever, and the year is completed in 364 days. So there's a lot of Enoch calendars out there, and I'm not going to go through every one of them because there's a ton of them, but there's a couple of popular ones that I'll point out something real fast. And this is an Enoch-based calendar called the Covenant Calendar. This is where the Covenant Calendar misses the mark slightly because they put all the intercalary days at the end of the year. And it says clearly in Enoch 72 that they are every third month. And then it's calculated as 30 days a month. And so that is why people get confused on the covenant calendar. They think it's 30 days because they've seen Genesis or Revelation and say, well, that's got to be at the end of the year for that to make sense. That's how it works together. Enoch 81, Enoch 72 shows you, and 74, that 30, 30, 31, 364 days a year, but when you're calculating, it's 30 days a month. Starting to make sense a little bit, isn't it? One more I'll go through, the Dead Sea or the Zadokite calendar. This was found in a lot of documentations in the Dead Sea Scrolls findings starting in 1947, 48, and to current. They're still looking at some of them. And what they do is they put the first day of the year on a Wednesday every single year, because they say that they do that because that goes along with Genesis 1, where the fourth day of creation was when the sun was created. And so they start the calendar on a Wednesday according to when the sun was created. That sounds okay, maybe, right? But here's the problem with that. If you do that, you mess up the 365 days a year. We know the year's 365 days, or we'd start going backwards in time with our calendar. We know this. Their calendar is 364 days only. And there's no indication that they had any other means to account for that extra day or extra day and a quarter, that a solar revelation is a year. So what that means is that your year will start going backwards by 1 day a year, which doesn't seem major, but after 180 years, you'd be celebrating Passover in the middle of fall, which is completely opposite. And so that can't happen because we have to stay on his time. And if they put in an extra day, then what they just did is they destroyed the Creator's 7-day week of creation. Because he says, keep this 7-day cycle forever. 6 days of work and 7th day is rest. And so if they put an extra day into the year and start it on a Wednesday, because if you look when each successive year calendar starts on a 365-day year, it moves up a day each year. Because you have 52 weeks in a year, 364 days. And so if you start on a Sunday, at the end of this 52nd week, it's going to be on the Shabbat. But if you have the 365th day in, that would be the Sunday, and so you start the next year on the Monday. And so it starts 1 year on Sunday, the next year on Monday, next year on Tuesday for 365. So if you start on a Wednesday every single year, you destroy the Sabbath cycle. And that doesn't witness to me in the Spirit. And there were some other things that I've been reading on those people that were in those caves that, maybe they weren't quite as on the righteous trail as they have been told to be, or maybe they started and went astray also. So we respect the findings in these caves, but we don't just blindly follow them. This is your calendar that comes out of Enoch, and it's 12 months, 30 days a year, except for the third month of every season, which is an extra day, the intercalary day for the seasons. And then at the top left is something that says SE, and that is the spring equinox day, or it could be the equilux day. It's the division event between the years, but this day is not included in the 364-day calendar. Now let's look at this. The equal day and night, the divider of years, quote unquote, day 365. At the end of the 12th month in Enoch 72:31, it says there'll be 30 mornings, and it sets in the west of the heavens. And the very next verse, it says, and on that day, the night becomes shorter and amounts to 9 parts. And then the following day amounts to 9 parts. And the night becomes equal with the day, but then the year still equals 364 days. So if you look through Enoch 72 in detail, you'll see how the very next day is the next period or the next month. And so this is the next period, but it's a one-day period. And it's saying you're looking for this sign in the heaven where the night is equal to the day. And you say on that day, this is the divider of years, and tomorrow we start a V1. And that describes an equinox where the day and the night are equal. Now note that a modern definition of equinox is not exactly equal light and equal darkness, and we'll show that in a second. So there's some ambiguity here that we have. Sundials and water clocks, how would they keep time of equal day and equal night, right? They didn't have watches or computers. They possibly had sundials. They possibly had water clocks. There is no evidence in Scripture for water clocks, even though they were historically around in Egypt and Persia at the time. There was a possible, I think, 7-inch diameter sundial found in Qumran there on the top left there. There's one from Egypt from about 1500 BC on the top right. And then the bottom right is sort of interesting, and we'll show you this in a second. Gilgal Rephaim, which is the Stonehenge of the Middle East, which probably most people haven't heard of. Gilgal Rephaim, or the Wheel of Giants, is 10 miles to the east of the Sea of Galilee in the Golan Heights. It's made of 42,000 rocks. It's 520 feet across with 8-foot walls on the outside and a 15-foot mountain in the center. Some evidence that this served once as a primitive calendar, helping people mark the seasons. On the longest day, the first rays of the sun shone through an opening at the northeast entrance. It was not a perfect angle, so they're assuming the builders didn't quite have it right. Deuteronomy 3:13 sheds a little light on this. And the rest of Gilead and Bashan and the kingdom of Og the giant gave unto the half-tribe of Manasseh and all the region of Bashan, which was called the land of the giants. Giants in Hebrew is Rephaim, which is what it's called. So this might have been what the giants had created, Og and his tribes of giants. And if that was true, then they were probably worshiping Tammuz and Ishtar or Ashtaroth back in the day. But this is evidence of probable calendar keeping or attempts of calendar keeping in very ancient antiquity, 1500 BC, in the land. In Isaiah and 2 Kings, does it actually say something that says sundial? And behold, I will bring again the shadow of the degrees, which is gone down in the sundial of Ahaz, 10 degrees backwards. This was when King Hezekiah was dying. Doctors had given up on him, and he was going to die. And he prayed, and he brought in Isaiah, and Yah said, yes, I will give you more life. I will give you time to have a son. Hezekiah said, that sounds great, but give me a sign. And he said, okay, I will turn back time in that day for what is said is 10 degrees backwards. 10 degrees forward is not a big deal because that will happen anything. Well, I'll turn it backwards 10 degrees. And so they saw the sign and they knew he was going to live. Dial in the King James is only listed 2 times in Isaiah 38 and 2 Kings 20. And Ma'alah is the word for dial, and it's used as degrees 25 times, steps or stairs a total of 16 times, or going up or ascending a few times. I looked in the Septuagint. Whenever there's a little bit of a question here, that's a great second witness to go to. And it said in Isaiah 38, behold, I turn back the shadow of the degrees, quote unquote, of the dial, so that's not in the text, by 10 degrees on the house of your father, the sun has gone down. And his Antiquities book actually also has some more information here. He says 10 steps or degrees in his house to return again to the same place. So we've got 3 different things here. One says it's a sundial, one says it's a house, 10 degrees on a house, another is steps. So this is what the walled city of Jerusalem looked like in those days. And at the top right would have been the area where the Temple Mount was. In the middle was where the king's house was. And you can tell that there were a great many stairs that led down to where the streets were and the gates to get out to the Kidron Valley. There's scriptural evidence of these stairs by the king's house. It's in 2 Chronicles 23 right there, and Nehemiah 12, and there's actually a couple more. We went up by the stairs of the city of David, going up of the wall above the house of David, which is the king's house. See Hezekiah sitting in his house. deathly ill, laying on his bed, and he's looking out probably the front door of his house. And he's looking at the Mount of Olives across the way. And he's watching the sun sink and the shadows go down the steps of his house all the way down every day, thinking, I have no son, I'm going to die. I have no son, I'm going to die. And he asks, bring back the shadow 10 steps in front of my house. And Yah did that. Go and say to Hezekiah, says Yah, I've heard your prayer, I've seen your tears. Behold, I will add unto your days 15 years. I will bring again the shadow of the steps, which has gone down in the steps of Ahaz, his father, the king's house, 10 steps backwards. Psalms 120 through 134, 15 psalms. Each of the psalms starts a song of degrees, which is ma'alah, which is the same Hebrew word we're looking at for degrees, for steps, for sundial. Doesn't make much sense. 4 of them say they're Song of Degrees of David. A 5th one says it's a Song of Degrees for Solomon. Septuagint has nothing saying that these are songs of David or for Solomon. It just says these are songs of degrees. Now, if we say these are songs of steps or song of ascent, 15 psalms, 15 years of life given to Hezekiah. These were his psalms that were written by him or under him to rejoice in the extra life that he has given so that the seed of David would continue in his kingdom. It's not song of degrees, song of steps, song of ascent. And see, this is a shadow of us ascending. At this day, I've come to the end of the matter that I cannot tell you when his calendar starts, the exact day. He told us in Jubilees that you will lose the calendar. This was a prophecy, and thus we have. And maybe it's not for us to know at this time when his calendar starts. Maybe this is one of those things that our Savior, when he comes back in a few years, is going to say, well done, good try. This is it. Let's start. The unknowns are not with the number of the days of the year or the months. When do we start each year? Enoch 72 says the night becomes equal with the day. And it's based on a position of the sun in the sky at a certain time or the amount of sunlight during a day. It's a little vague. There's no mention of sundials or water clocks in scriptures. We just saw it. We looked at 2 mentions of sundials, and they're not sundials or steps. The ancient Israelites didn't keep exact time like we do today. The first time hour appears in scriptures in Daniel, which is well after Hezekiah by 150 years at least. And hour just means shortly, not as our current understanding of hour is. Equinox in Latin means equal night and equal day, which gives the impression that there's 12 hours in a day, but that's common wisdom, but it's not quite accurate. It depends on where you are on the earth. Also depends on how you calculate day, because day starts at the first moment you see the sun. Sunset ends when the last of the sun goes away. And so you've got the diameter of the sun that you're counting both times, which adds extra minutes, almost 3 minutes into every day. I've found no answer. Equinoxes only happen twice a year. We know it starts in the spring and the fall, and the sun rises from due east and sets due west. Now, we did say they might have had some sundials. Which day is the divider of years? I can't tell you. This is from timeanddate.com for Jerusalem. I picked Jerusalem, but then even I thought that Enoch didn't live in Jerusalem. He lived somewhere in Mesopotamia, somewhere in Turkey. We don't know. And so it wasn't necessarily in Jerusalem. The first day where the day is equal day and night would be the 17th of March. This is this year, by the way, in Jerusalem. The 17th of March is when it is 12 hours and 1 minute and changes over from 11 hours. That's a possibility. The 18th would be a possibility if we take out half the sun, the extra 3 minutes. Plus, it's the first day that the sets at night in the due west, which matched up with Enoch 72. Look for when the night is equal with the day, and the next day will it be equal with the night. What they most likely did, they had a lined up dial, and they saw when it hit 90 degrees due west, the sun setting, and they looked the next morning for 90 degrees due east, and they said they're equal, because they had no time mechanism to the second. Now, having said that, there's two possibilities. So, I mean, it's always something, right? So it could be the 19th when that happened, when they saw the day was equal to night. It could be the 20th when that happened. And the 20th is when we are told that it is the spring equinox for the entire earth, when the sun moves up over the equator and is at that point your equal day and night, 90 degrees east and west. Based on, it doesn't matter where you are on earth, it's the sun that defines these things and the moon. And so the equinox is maybe the day. It could be the 19th, it could be the other days, I don't know. But we know we're close, and he sees us trying. I've shown you the Enoch calendar, how it matches in Jubilees. We said that we would lose track of the calendar, and thus we have, and so we can only estimate when the year starts. And we looked at the ancient pagan religions last week. Babylon, Hindu, Buddhist, Greek all have a lunar-based calendar, or did. Rome started with a lunar calendar and changed it to match the solar calendar. Islam still keeps a lunar calendar. Judaism still keeps a lunar calendar. Egypt began with a lunar calendar, but then changed to a different one. The ancient Egyptian calendar was not a solar calendar, it was a lunar calendar at the beginning, before what they called a civil calendar. And the ancient Egyptian calendar, once it changed to this civil calendar, was solar-based with 3 seasons of 120 days each, plus an intercalary day of 5 days at the end of the year. Each month was 30 days. And so their calendar was 365 days in Egypt, once they changed from a lunar calendar to a solar calendar. Why the transfer was made is much less certain, say scholars. They don't really know why. Maybe they're just trying to be more definite and have fixed dates for their celebrations and planning. But they have no answer. It's documented also in Plutarch, which is an ancient historian. He adds some pagan connotations to it, but he basically says there's 5 intercalary days as an addition to 360 days. 365-day calendar, 30 days a month, 5 days at the end. And this solar civil calendar was established in the Old Kingdom, and its probable evidence was showing up in the reign of Shepseskaf, which was an old king. There was a pharaoh called Dozier that was approximately 75 years before this king, where the physical evidence of the calendar appeared first. And Dozier was a great pharaoh. He was the king in which the step pyramids were first started. The first pyramid in the world was designed and built under Pharaoh Dozier. Dozier's architect was a guy named Imhotep, and he is credited with the actual development of the building of the stone and the conception of this architectural form, this step pyramid. This chief architect was the chief minister of Pharaoh. He was the Grand Vizier, second in command. He was a commoner by birth, advanced by position to be one of the most important and influential men in Egypt through his natural talents. He was called the chief of the seers, so he was adept at having visions or describing visions. He was historic. It's confirmed by bottom of a statue where his name is on the same pedestal as Pharaoh Dozier. He was equated with architecture, mathematics, medicine, and scribes. These innovations that were attributed to Dozier were initiated by Imhotep, and he changed the world by these things. But they don't know where his tomb is at this point. They found many pharaohs, they haven't found Imhotep's. This is the base of the pedestal where his name is written, Egyptian hieroglyphics, but that is Imhotep down there. He had a reputation as the reigning genius of his time, and he was thought to go on to serve his successors, having a long life, at least 3 following successors, and he was much sought after his talents. Medicine, the Edwin Smith Papyrus, if anybody's heard of that, that is an ancient medical approach that has modern techniques. It has 100 anatomical terms, describes 48 injuries and their treatment with a modern approach. And it's written in a hieratic script, which is a cursive shorthand of Egyptian, which was about the first that ever appeared. Instead of just basic hieroglyphics, it was shorthand using letter representations of their hieroglyphics. The hieroglyphic script was written instead of Egyptian hieroglyphics right to left. And it's also known that early Hebrew used the hieratic numbering system. The famine stele was discovered in the late 1800s, and you can call it the Hungry Rock. That's what that means. It was in Egypt. The famine stele describes a 7-year period of drought and famine that happened in Egypt. And the pharaoh associated with that drought was Pharaoh Dozier. And on the famine stele, Dozier had a dream about the drought recovery and how to build, and the famine is brought to an end when his chief vizier, Imhotep, visits the source of the Nile. Interesting stuff, huh? Does anybody remember that Joseph used to be in Egypt? And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, there comes 7 years of great plenty, and then there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and it shall be grievous. And Joseph said, this is how you should address this, so we are well through this period. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, there is none so discreet and wise as you. See, I've set you all over the land. And he was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house, and Joseph lived in Egypt until he was 110. He served in this capacity for 80 years. And Dozier didn't live that long. Joseph stored food during the 7 years of plenty. We all know this story in Genesis. He gathered up all the excess food for 7 years, and he laid them up, the food in all the cities. And Joseph gathered the corn as the sand of the sea, very much until he couldn't count anymore. It was without number. And then all the nations came to him and gave all the wealth to Egypt. And all the inhabitants of Egypt gave all of their wealth and their land to Pharaoh to just live with the corn. And Pharaoh became great and wealthy, and Egypt became a world power through this plan. Remember the step pyramid I showed you at Saqqara? Right beside the step pyramid are 11 huge grain pits. This is one of them. There's 11 of these. There's a building there of where the nations of the world and people could come in and pay, and different pillars where they probably have different people in different languages so they can communicate with all the people of the world and pay to get grain. And there was a procession where they come into the building in only one way, and they would pay, and then they'd probably get a token. They'd come out here and get some grain and go out the exit and leave. These were just discovered 30, 40 years ago by a man named Ron Wyatt. They are immensely deep, and they did find grain at the bottom of these when they were first discovered. So if you haven't figured this out already, this great man, Imhotep, the one that's described to be a genius and builder of pyramids and writers of this new script, letters, medical procedures, seer of visions, it was Joseph. Joseph was a commoner that rose to second in command in Pharaoh when he interpreted Pharaoh's dream and then implemented the means for Egypt to prepare for the drought and prosper. Egypt became that world power as the nations came to Pharaoh for grain, which gave them the means to build the rest of the pyramids. Joseph built the grain storage bins, those giant storage bins that you just saw, and the first step pyramid. He wrote in the hieratic script that used numbers from the Hebrew that he remembered as a boy, with letters symbolizing shortening the hieroglyphics to make it easier to write. Joseph was in power 80 years and lived into the rule of subsequent pharaohs, including that one pharaoh where the first physical evidence of a solar calendar appeared. Joseph implemented a civil calendar that would be precise from year to year, replacing Egypt's lunar calendar with the calendar he knew from his youth, the Enoch solar calendar we just looked at today, with 4 seasons, 12 months of 30 days, and 5 intercalary days. And of course, as time, Egypt changes that to different approaches and put their pagan god celebrations on top of it. This calendar is documented by historians through the ages with physical evidence either during or just after his lifetime. And the scholars say they don't know how Egypt's calendar got changed from the lunar calendar to solar, but now you do. Isn't Yah amazing? The lost calendar. So thank you, everybody.